So Emma is the co-founder and CEO of AgriDigital. And as you probably all know, AgriDigital is a world leader in the application of blockchain to develop efficient, trusted agricultural supply chains. And you might have seen that 2 weeks ago, AgriDigital announced that it had closed a $25 million funding round. So very exciting news. Emma's had an extremely diverse career. She started as a lawyer, and as a result of all the experiences that she's had since then, she's now recognized as a world leader in a wide range of fields, including blockchain, AgTech, fintech, women in tech, and now in the startup world. So very, very excited to hear from Emma this evening. What we've asked Emma to talk about is just to tell us a little bit about the story of AgriDigital, to tell us with the benefit of hindsight, what are the kinds of factors that enabled AgriDigital's success? And in particular, because this program is about facilitating mixing between AgTech entrepreneurs and researchers who are working in AgTech, we'd like to hear Emma's perspective on her view as an entrepreneur in this space as to what role access to university research has played in AgriDigital's success so far, and what might have happened if AgriDigital had access to that research earlier. Over to you, Emma.
Cool. Thanks very much, Jonathan. So I'm happy to briefly introduce myself, and then I guess we're just doing this fireside chat style. There's obviously quite a few people, I guess, who'll be dialing in at a later date or watching this webinar as the accelerator program gets underway. So with that in mind, I guess we'll be able to kind of have a cozy chat together, which kind of means from my perspective, Jonathan, I don't mind if people want to kind of pipe up in the middle and ask questions, put their hand up. I mean, we're a pretty tight group, which I think enables that to happen, which is nice. So just to recap, I am Emma Weston. So I'm the CEO and a co-founder at AgriDigital. I have two co-founders who work alongside me. So I certainly don't do this alone, and a team of 35 plus, but kind of growing each day. And we are really focused at AgriDigital on solving particular pain points that plague supply chains. So that's really our deep focus, is looking at what the digital supply chain of the future is going to be like, and being at the forefront of providing infrastructure, both from a software and inventory management perspective, but also from a capital perspective. So we're a little unusual in that we are not just a technology company, or not just an ag tech company, we're also a fintech company, because the two biggest problems for our customers, and we do think of our customers actually being the supply chain. So that's everything from the farmer forward all the way through to a consumer. But if you are in the supply chain, the two biggest problems that our customers face are access to best-in-class technology to compete with the very large multinationals that are out there who dominate our supply chains, and I'll give some fun facts around that. But also access to capital. And you may think the world is awash with capital, but if you are an entrepreneur, or a founder, you often find it's hard to connect with capital. So we're probably going to talk about that today as well. And what we find at AgriDigital is that we have set about to, I guess, completely transform the supply chain in terms of building a digital platform that digitizes grain from the paddock all the way through to payment, and then collates data about that grain as it passes through the supply chain, and provides all of the inventory management capability and operational capability to get grain into our food. We pretty much stop once it's at the food part of the supply chain. So I apologize if there's a lot of foodies here or dialing in later. I am very ag focused. And one of the things that you learn pretty quickly is that although it's often referred to as agri-food, agriculture and food are actually quite different, which is dumb because they shouldn't be, but they are quite different. And so our customers, just to make that a little bit clearer, tend to be farmers, storage operators or elevators, as they're called in the US, grain elevators, brokers, buyers of grain. So they could be processors, they could be traders. By processors, that would include millers, dairies, feedlots, oil crushers, you name it, like everybody in the supply chain. And it is a very complex beast, supply chain, as we've seen, and quite fragile, as we've seen during COVID as well. And one of the big challenges we've faced is designing a product for multiple customers rather than just one persona type. So that's a little bit of background on who we are. Jonathan, you alluded to my background. Happy to jump into that as well at some point if that's interesting. But yes, I did start off life as a lawyer for my sins. And, you know, since saw the light very clearly and moved into agriculture. I didn't actually grow up on a farm, so I am a farmer now, and my two co-farmers are founders, but I'm married into that. So I also chose that, I'd like to say. It wasn't just kind of inherited or foisted upon me. It was all part of a positive choice on my part, and haven't really looked back. But how I made that transition was I started off as a junior lawyer at the Australian Wheat Board in a really pivotal time, and then changed out of the legal profession into an executive career, and then, you know, went into entrepreneurial ag. And so AgriDigital is actually my third ag venture with the group of founders that I'm with now. So as a group of founders, we've been together for 16 years, and this is our third business, and we exited the other two some time ago. So this isn't my first, my first ag startup party. I've been here for a little while. But certainly still learning heaps, and yeah, definitely don't know everything. And I guess that's why I find AgTech Seeds quite intriguing, because one of the things that I wish we had been able to do earlier at AgriDigital is connect in with the research community in a really positive way, with a framework around like a framework for engagement. But we started AgriDigital in 2016, didn't really get commercial to 2017. And yeah, we just found it very hard to engage with the R&D community generally. Probably didn't really know where to find some of you if you are part of that community, and also didn't know how to engage if we did find you. So very open with some of the mistakes that we've probably made along the way. And yeah, that's partly why I'm really happy to be here with AgTech Seeds today.
Thanks, Emma. And Emily's put up a question there that really keen to jump into that whole question about engagement with researchers, because that's really what AgTech Seeds is about. But or that's one of its distinguishing features. But of course, in any kind of business like this, you know, including the sorts of thinking that impact-focused researchers go through, there's you know, the kinds of questions that Emily asked are really important. So Emily's question: how did AgriDigital learn about the customer being the supply chain? It can be overwhelming for startups trying to solve problems for all types of customers. What did AgriDigital do to prioritize this long list?
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, AgriDigital is now working with players at a number of different positions in that value chain, but where did it start?
So I think this is a really important kind of set of questions. It's like a nested set of questions in one question there. But I guess to take a step back, you know, I guess as I alluded to, I have been in the ag industry for quite some time. So personally have been working in the grains industry for around about, 20 plus years, like a long time. A lot of gray hair here. So, and my two co-founders are the same. So I think we have 80 or 35 years of agricultural experience across the three of us. So we had, hey Sam, great to see you again as well. And so when we were looking at who is the customer here, and I guess about how we came to start AgriDigital, we actually were the customer, and we had been the customer in previous incarnations in our careers. And so we had this kind of really unique understanding that I probably have undervalued in the research community, or misunderstood in the research community, where as an entrepreneur and as a founder, we have felt ourselves to be naturally more connected to the customer perhaps than the research community is. And so that's kind of a bridge that, you know, and an information or a PR bridge almost that might need to be built at some point. Previously, we had worked with all of those different parts of the supply chain, or we had been all of those different parts of the supply chain. So we had this quite unique understanding. We now sort of stand here as farmers still, but farmers are not the only customer we have. When we started AgriDigital, though, we had a really clear view that although there was a huge impact to be made across the whole supply chain, and specifically with farmers, and we had a thesis around the way we thought supply chain was going to evolve for farmers, we did not think farmers were our first customer. So we did not go after farmers first. What we actually wanted to prove up was that a platform approach to supply chain digitization would work. And in order to do that, we had to go for the hubs, the hub points within the supply chain. And the farmer is not a hub point. The farmer is the beginning of the supply chain, but they're not an aggregator. So we went after both customer as well as data aggregators, because data feeds our algorithms. And that for us meant storage operators and traders. And so we built up a cohort of storage operators and traders. And for every storage operator or trader that we brought on, and this is true for the grain supply chain, but not necessarily for every other type of ag good out there or commodity out there, for every storage operator or trader that we brought onto the AgriDigital platform, we would tend to get between 100 to 500 growers coming along with that trader. So we very quickly built out a cohort of farmer users that is now a near monetization pipeline for us. And we very deliberately went after that, knowing we were never going to monetize farmers until later on, and that we had to prove value and we had to understand time to value for the farmer. And we're still in the process of doing that, to be honest. There would be some farmers who would say they love what we do, and there'd be other farmers saying it wasn't that useful for me. So just like the supply chain is made up of a huge number of potential customers for us, the farmer group is also incredibly diverse. And to kind of think there's like one typical farmer persona, I think is a mistake that many of us, make to our detriment, I think.
Sorry, I'm a bit slow on the unmute button this evening for some reason. Yeah, that's really helpful, Emma. And want to come back to Nikki's question about the business at a high level in a minute. But I just thought, actually, let's do that one first, and then I want to dive into the whole role of researchers, because yeah, there's a number of people here that are probably interested in that. So Nikki's question: I'd be interested in how Emma sees the company's growth strategy, given this model could be replicated across any supply chain in ag. Is going offshore the main growth strategy?
Yeah, so one thing that we have we decided on really early, Nikki and others, was that we were not going to operate in stealth mode. So we would be open with our strategy, we would be open with our tech, we would be open with our office, we would be, as open as we could be, given that we're actually we don't build open source tech, but we would still kind of, be, I guess, as open and sharing with information as we could be. And so from a strategic perspective, very happy to share this, and others may have heard this before. Sam and I've met a couple of times. So, sorry if I'm repeating stuff, but we had a particular expertise and a known network that we could roll out what we were building very quickly in grain. And so it was really clear that the grain supply chain was good for us. It also happens to be $1 trillion global industry. So it's big enough. Like we don't have to go outside of grain. And we have decided indeed to be quite deep in what we do in grain. And that is our main focus for the short and the medium term. However, there are other adjacencies, and that's the way we think about it. We think about strategic adjacencies in terms of where we would be going next. And those adjacencies really happen along 3 dimensions for us. So those 3 dimensions are commodity, supply chain position or value chain position, and geography. And so we've obviously decided to go deep in grain. And for us, that has meant deep across the supply chain dimension, i.e. build out from farmer through to consumer, and to therefore limit our commodity dimension and limit our geographic dimension to date. So we are now just expanding into the US. So that's a kind of an expansion across that dimension. That gives us a launching pad into both Canada as well as South America. So there's quite a good kind of growth opportunity for us there. And the grains industry happens, or kind of rolls out in a not a dissimilar way in North America to what it does in Australia. Large industry, well supported, and being realistic, English speaking, with relatively similar regulatory kind of a similar regulatory backbone by and large. So these were things that we look at when thinking about how to grow the company. Having said that, when we started AgriDigital, the platform, I think, had about 11 grain commodities. And by grain, we mean everything from, what you would regard as grains such as wheat and barley, through to oil seeds, legumes such as chickpeas or field peas or lentils, all the way through to rice, and also oil seeds, so canola, sunflower, safflower, etc. So the whole gamut of grains is what we cover on the platform. And we started off with about 11 base commodities with multiple grades that sit within that, but about 11 base commodities. There are now, at last count, when I was in having a look at this a little while ago, 86 commodities. And I would not be able to tell you 86 grains. So when I saw that, I thought, that's really interesting. Let me go and have a look at that. And so 25 of those are grains, and roughly 61 therefore are non-grain commodities that our customers are using AgriDigital for. And I guess that happens when you build software and you put it in the wild. People make of it what they will, right? They use it how they want to use it, which is an interesting conundrum as a software developer and builder, and also to support that into the market. So our customers are using AgriDigital for everything from grains, for which it is purposed, through to star pickets, which, if you don't know what they are, they're fence posts essentially, through to diesel, water, bird seed, cement, aggregate, fertilizer, hay, all sorts of things that we never thought about when we built AgriDigital. And every so often we do run up against issues around how we've built the product versus how it's been used. So that's kind of a common commercialization grief point, I guess, at different, normally a success point, but shows you're doing something right. However, can be a bit of an issue from time to time.
Fantastic. Emma, I'm keen to dive more into the question of the role that researchers are playing in the company today, or researchers or research, and how you might do that differently if you were doing it again. So maybe if we just start with the present, maybe if you can just tell us a little bit more about what role research and researchers actually play in the company today.
Yeah, so actually not a huge amount. And, one of the reasons for that, as I said, was that we either didn't have a framework to engage, or if we did engage with various universities or, research points, it was difficult to get a meeting of the minds. And that's why, that's why I'm here this evening, guys. So, and I think without programs like AgTech Seeds, to be honest, this is not going to happen, because there is not necessarily a natural fit between an entrepreneurial founder and an academic researcher. And I'm not saying that those researchers who are on the call would classify themselves as academic researchers, but in this country, that is what we have largely been proud of, has been our academic research cohort, which is world-class. And we should rightly be proud of that. However, that connection between research through to commercialization is, as we know, has, as we know, been problematic for Australia. And, I do remember, going to CSIRO in the early days, and I didn't know they invented Wi-Fi. I mean, who knew that, right? But, and then being told, and I was like, well, why are we even paying you guys taxes? Like, the world should be paying you a tax on Wi-Fi, right? Like, this should be one of the largest, most profitable companies in the world. And that history of a lack of commerciality to research, I guess, underpinned my, being frank, maybe lack of respect for research and how it could contribute to AgriDigital, because I just saw it as uncommercial. And that, these hang-ups of these great things that had been invented but never commercialized properly, in this country, probably colored my view really, in a really stereotypically poor way, to be honest. So, plenty of notched up mistakes there. And as a result, what has happened is we have, we're now in a point where 5-6 years down the track, we're having to refactor large components of our platform, particularly in our data architecture. And if we had been able to engage more profoundly with the research community earlier on, my guess is that we would not be going through some of the pain that we're going through now. And I'm not proud to say it, but I'm, happy to admit it. That's just a reality. And I don't think we would be alone either in the ag tech sector or in the broader tech community of having been, well, I hope I'm not too proud to admit that mistake, and I don't want to make that mistake again. And so therefore, now when we're looking at how we architect our, multi microservice solutions across complex 3-dimensional strategic planes, we need more help. We need more smarts than what we have, and we need but what we are finding is that we still need to build out the engagement models. So we're still not seeing quite the type of engagement model or framework that's needed to be able to bring that research in-house, and still some conflicting components to the academic history of research or the academic bias of research in the past, where we might view something as crucial IP, and the researcher may be thinking, I want to publish. So, that kind of tension is still a little unresolved, I think, not just in AgriDigital, but, more generally.
Can you hear a bit more about where the challenges are in the engagement model? I mean, you mentioned one there, which is the tension between protecting intellectual property and publishing. What are some other aspects of the engagement that have been challenging or that haven't worked, or where there's been a mismatch?
So I think that one was an obvious one. So let's just park that one and kind of say that's kind of old news. But, I think the areas that are of keen interest to me to see being developed are around risk sharing models, and also around structural incentives for researchers that do not necessarily involve incorporating ideas. And, as a little bit of background when we were talking about this, I am very much anti the, I have an idea, let's go and incorporate model. I really am much more around, what problem are you solving, and does that idea contribute to a problem solution set that has been worked on, and where is that being worked on, and who is that being worked on, and what is and who is the team that should be working on that. And so researchers who have components of that solution or ideas that can contribute to that solution, we need to build out frameworks to be able to bring them into models of commercialization that are already rolling or underway. And then, just that earlier one around risk sharing. We found it very difficult to be able to put forward risk sharing frameworks and models, and we did try that in the early days, but there was not an appetite. It was seen as a monetization component for universities / research organizations to, I was about to be rude, pimp out their research teams, and I don't mean to be rude about that, but there was seriously tensions within the research teams themselves who clearly felt uncomfortable being pressed into consulting models of monetization when what they wanted to be doing was working on deep problems and solutions and having the opportunity for applied research. And a startup to scale up provides that unique opportunity for applied research in action and connecting with the customer early. We just found there was a mismatch at the time.
So it sounds like some of those mismatches were with the researchers themselves, and some of them were probably with some of the research management or the technology transfer people or the research income people at the universities. Would that be right?
Yeah, it was a spectrum, right? We're talking about people, and so it's a spectrum of problem and possibility. But one of the things that I did in the early days, and then I kind of I must admit, I got a bit internalized in what we were doing at AgriDigital, was to go and have a look at the Israeli research model. and technology transfer model, because I felt that perhaps there were some lessons for us in that. And so I kind of made friends with a couple of the Jewish councils throughout Australia who were looking at bringing Israeli, researchers, university professors, etc., so I could learn more about that research model. And there seemed to be a lot of sense to me in the idea of incubating within particular areas of expertise of a country, incubating that within the university structure, and having a known pathway to equitization of that research, and then being able to connect that research with the investment community. And I guess that's not going to be successful all of the time, but that did seem like a pretty cool approach that has obviously worked amazingly well in several universities in Israel.
Just picking up on Chris's question in the chat, just wondering whether AgriDigital tried using any existing government schemes that are meant to fund and support this kind of interaction between companies and researchers, like the ARC linkage scheme. Were any of those looked at?
No, not really. I mean, we probably didn't know what we didn't know, Chris, to be honest. And I think there's a much better curation of grants and other schemes than what there was back in 2015, 2016. I mean, we were also doing a lot of blockchain in 15, 16, 17. It was, it almost feels like that's pretty normal now. It really wasn't at the time. And, government wasn't sure they wanted to be involved in blockchain. And so we found ourselves on the fringes of the research community and of the grant schemes with respect to the technology that we were using or seeking to use, to a point where we effectively had to disband certain parts of our research activities because we were clearly not going to be funded. And yes, I mean, that's the normal frustrations of being well in advance of government policy, but that was very much the case. It was mired down in a misunderstanding of crypto and kind of the crypto punk movement. Like, we just want growers to be paid on time, and we can use blockchain for real-time title transfer and real-time payments transfer, but it was, you did feel like you were sometimes just speaking into the wind there, unfortunately.
Which is funny, because that's the whole point of research. It's meant to be at the cutting edge, and so that's where you need to go and find out what,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think it's so really kind of disappointing, but we did engage, with Mark Staples and the team, at Data 61. There were elements there that were fantastic. And in actual fact, I mean, I've kind of talked about the things that didn't work, but a couple of the things that did work really well were where we could find out how we could contribute to something that, was going to get into a published environment. And there was information that we were happy to be able to release and to share. And, then we could work with, Mark and his team around several papers that I think were really important for Australia in terms of putting it on the research scene from a blockchain perspective. So there were some things that did work. But I also think as an entrepreneur, as a former executive, in both large as well as my own companies, I didn't know how to engage with the research community. And so I had not grown up with a knowledge base and a framework for interaction. That was not something that was done as a matter of course in the companies that I worked with. And therefore that wasn't within my known, I guess, the parameters for how I operated, which is such a shame.
And researchers are not really looking for it either,
That's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, in broad terms, in Australia, we've got 100,000 plus world-leading researchers, most of whom don't know where to start in terms of engaging with industry, and we've got a lot of really innovative companies that don't really have any experience in engaging with researchers. So, that's a corner of that challenge is what AgTech Seeds is here to try and address, to try and help bring researchers and aspiring entrepreneurs closer together, and to connect them with with established companies and other players in the market.
I don't think I'm alone in that. I mean, I'd like, so I think, part of, we need to kind of like normalize the conversation around how, that engagement with the research community is a normal thing. It's a valuable thing, and also normalize the conversation with universities, research centres, cooperative research centres, etc. That commercialization is good, and and that that being part of a commercial effort, and understanding that the transition, that it's actually, I mean, the AgTech Seeds is very particular in its place in the world, in what it's seeking to do, but you can't stop at an MVP, right? You have to go and sell that thing. There has to be a market. You need to prove product market fit. And the best idea in the world, if you can't prove product market fit, at the end of the day, will go back onto the shelf or into the rubbish bin. And so the idea of equally rewarding commercial effort as well as research effort, and looking at how we can build companies and commercialization programs with a research bent, and researchers with a commercial eye for detail and a commercial respect for the customer, surely is the direction that we need to go in.
Yeah, I think there's a fair majority of us on this call who are in violent agreement with that. I mean, AgTech Seeds is a pre-accelerator, and the whole focus of the program is market validation. So that's absolutely what
Jonathan,
we're thinking about.
Can I ask just one question, because it's absolutely fascinating hearing the frustration in the process. So for me, I get a sense that it's got to have a sort of a place and a purpose. The innovative hub piece excites me, but how we actually deliver that in a dynamic way without running programs attached to it. How do you create an environment, an innovative hub environment, that allows you to dip in and dip out without attaching it to more specifically driven programs that have really strong outcomes that ultimately lend you in the right directions, you say, in the commercialization or the monetization, or even just the yield discussion. And the fact is, the problem solving piece that must start so early in the narrative. How do you feel, what should that look like? Is it a combination of things? Is it something that we bring the ecosystem together under one hub? I mean, for you, what would be the ideal place to pursue these issues that you've been clearly articulating?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to kind of throw a bit of a curveball in there, Tony, a little bit, and say tax policy. So, if you want to get everyone together, the one thing we all do is tax returns. And, to me, the R&D, rebate completely needs reworking. It was built for a manufacturing economy, and, we are transferring ourselves or moving into, a technology-driven economy. And, the RDTI does not keep up with that. And if it did, there would be direct incentive from a tax perspective to engage with the research community, because, we would be able to form technology-driven hypotheses rather than manufacturing-driven hypotheses or science or bio-driven hypotheses that could then, play out through into commercialization. So I actually think there's a role that if there was a complete review of, the RDTI, that would create a national conversation that recognises the contribution of research in technology companies, and creates specific opportunity for getting together, and multiple frameworks will then emerge. So I don't think we need to have one framework or one innovation hub, but I do think we need some level of certainty as to outcome and incentives for investment. And, you know, if that happens, then the models that drive towards those incentives will just, you know, naturally iterate over time.
Thanks, Emma. Taylor just put a link up there on chat to one of the fabulous programs that does exist that the federal government's had out there for a while. This one from the Department of Industry, Innovation Connections, which in simple terms, as I understand it, helps small companies, not tiny little pre-revenue startups, but small and growing companies that want to innovate, helps connect them with researchers who can help solve their problems, and actually helps partially fund the proof of concept projects that they might do together. So there are pieces of the puzzle in place already. We're just hoping that AgTech Seeds might be another piece in the puzzle.
I think that's cool, and thanks, Taylor, for putting that in. I just I saw you do that in the chat before, and just wanted to say that, yeah, we need to be comfortable with the uncertainty around the outcomes of research, and not be driven to, you know, have to have a kind of 1 + 1 = 2. Like, we need to be able to say, we might be starting with 1, we don't know what we're adding next, and we don't know what the end result exactly is going to be. And that the process of even just starting with 1 and moving forward from there is worthwhile. And, you know, that there are economic and other incentives to do that. So I think that's where some of the government programs, and I understand why, I understand that forms need to be filled in. Well, sorry, I don't understand. I know forms need to be filled in. I don't actually really understand why. But that as long as we kind of keep framing things with form filling, then that also creates a particular bias around how research and, you know, corporate and startup communities are going to engage. And I think we want more free flowing, you know, we want smash ups, right? We want mash ups. We just want to kind of run into each other and kind of go, you know, bloody hell, that's awesome what you're doing, Chris, you know, and because we keep seeing each other all the time, did you know what Sam's doing, you know? So like, we just need more of like that type of free flowing engagement, and to create the opportunity for possibility to develop. And that's really hard to put into a form and say, I would like some money for the opportunity for possibility to develop. You know, probably not that backable or fundable, you know, with taxpayer money, but, you know, that is actually what I believe we need.
Can I just make a comment that I spent about 12 weeks with 6 MBA students, and then from RMIT they asked me to work in with them so they could do their final exam on my company, and then another 2 students I was given to actually develop some of it. And I was, this point you're saying about like the crossover between the 2, I couldn't believe how difficult it was to communicate concepts to their brains. Like, they just couldn't. At the end of it, I was exhausted. I'd spent every week giving them so much data, and they completely missed the point. I mean, just totally, like, even who was my competitors were like, wait a minute, they're my clients, not my competitors. Like, you're really missing the point. And I was astounded at how difficult it was to communicate that. And I just kept going, what am I doing wrong? I can't get this language connection. So I really think it's a huge point that you've just made. And I think even for them, it was difficult because they had to keep fitting into the language the university wanted, which wasn't even what I knew from the brief, what they wanted them to learn. Like, they wanted industry interaction, and yet everything was about them gearing for the exam answers, which missed everything for them and for me. I sort of thought, wow, there's so much needs to be done in this area. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the problem solving piece is what we find as an employer that we're generally missing in employees. So we now almost say, don't even bother to send us your resume, because like, we'll just assume that you can do those things. And, you know, almost as well, like reference checking, what you're going to put some idiot reference on there? No, of course not. You're going to put your best references on there. So like, is that really a good use of my time to be doing that? So probably not. So now, we're much more focused around the problem solving capabilities and attributes, a growth mindset, because we do find that there's a lot of fixed mentality out there. And, then we're just looking at people and communication skills in particular. And now doing almost everything through, some kind of activity in a recruitment, where we are asking people to do things now, and look at the way that they solve problems, looking at how they present, how they communicate, how they think, as a much better way of predicting how they will perform in a role and also fit into the team at AgriDigital. Because for exactly those reasons, like, it's quite easy to hide behind, God, I've done it. I've got an MBA. I've hidden behind that a couple of times. Don't worry. So, it happens. And I think Taylor just made another really good point around the ability to continue accessing some of these programs. They're not once only. And he just has pulled me up on the fact that we are an AC recipient. So just to be really clear, because it's not like we have not had support. We have had plenty of support, both from the community as well as from government. And we were an accelerating commercialization grant recipient. And didn't realize, Taylor, that would enable us straight away to go into that Innovating Connections program. And that could be on me. Like, it could be that I have missed a communication, or, there has been also quite a lot of change in AC. And so I think there has been a lot of new advisors coming on and things like that. And we could have just fallen in the cracks there. But just wanted to acknowledge that comment that Taylor had made.
Thanks, Emma. We might just take one more question, and then we'll thank you and wrap up. And maybe want to go back to the question that Olha posted on the chat a while ago, which was related to a question that Sam posted as well, to do with the challenges for going right back up to the top level of what AgriDigital is doing at the moment. What are the challenges associated in scaling up the company in foreign markets, and what the company's doing to address those challenges?
Yeah. So our number one challenge at the moment would be talent. So just accessing talent to grow. That definitely is a huge one. So we're not alone in that, but very specifically around scaling into new markets. And that market for us is the US. So I'm heading off to the US tomorrow. And that's my first trip back since I came back from the US in March 2020. There was a little thing happening in the world at that time. Really excited to get back in market. I think the biggest challenge around, outside of COVID, right, let's just kind of put that to the side. The big challenge about growing into a market like the US is the size. So we are quite small in Australia, big country, but kind of small in kind of where we fit and play generally. So that is a challenge about just how to attack a large market, how to think about a large market, and how to do that without blowing everything that you've just raised, because you can kind of lose, things are very expensive. It's very expensive to get established. So the way that we've been thinking about it is to do a lot of background research and engagement, really for the past 2 to 3 years before even going into the market, and then waiting until we had customers there who started pulling us into the market. So rather than trying to land and get customers, we have kind of made our product available. We did some really light marketing, really haven't done anything else. And now we've got customers pulling us into the market. And so we can work with those customers to then actually have credibility in the market, and to be able to explain who we are. In the meantime, we've now grown to a point where, we are the largest grain technology platform in Australia. So we are definitely the dominant software provider to the grains industry in Australia now. And we have a real reason to go to the US. Why would you go to the US if you're 1% of the market in Australia, when the US is so big anyway? So, for us, it really meant doubling down on our home market to the point where it made sense to go to the US, but then really still having light engagement with the US. So we weren't hitting the ground, without knowledge, without networks, without customers, We have got partners already on board. We did take a small investment from a Bay Area investor in the agri-food system. So we're landing with an investor on board to help us get into the investment community, or deeper into the investment community there. We have been engaging with a number of support groups over there, both in terms of Austrade as well as like Aussie founders and a number of other groups. So we don't land without friends. And we have a small team only. So we've just gone for a couple of locals. I did make the mistake of doing the Aussie thing first. That was a mistake. I think you hire local and you hire as strongly senior as you can. We definitely made that mistake. So we have an incredible head of business development and partnerships globally who is based in our office there in Bozeman, Montana, Katrina Stanislaw. And she has been, senior enough to represent us in market, but also to build a team around. And it does mean that as founders, we do not need to be there all the time, but that may be something that, some teams want to look at, is actually moving a founder over there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Emma. This has been a really stimulating discussion, going in all kinds of different directions and exploring some really pretty big questions here. We'd like to thank you again very much for giving up your very valuable time to be with us. We want to wish you all the best for your trip tomorrow, and we're looking forward to seeing AgriDigital go from strength to strength.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. It was and Emily as well, and Emma, Nikki. It was really great to be here. I just want to thank everyone for the support. I know a couple of you have supported us at so many different points in the past, and we're really grateful, and I hope we're gracious about that as well. But there are significant challenges for how this industry develops and how we do research in this country. And just wishing AgTech Seeds and Rocket Seed all the best in the accelerator.
Thank you very much, Emma. And just for the people that joined late, just as a bit of a reminder about what AgTech Seeds is about, and a final kind of call to action before we all let you head off for the evening, for those of us who are in Australia. So AgTech Seeds is a series of pre-accelerator programs funded by LaunchVic, so aimed at Victorian AgTech researchers, or researchers who are working on problems and capabilities related to AgTech, and aspiring AgTech entrepreneurs in Victoria. What we want to do in this program is bring those people together with the aim of forming kind of super teams that have entrepreneurial strength and also deep technology strength from the researchers. Helping those people in the pre-accelerator program to validate and test the commercial potential of their idea, and hopefully kind of launch them onto the next stage through introductions to partners, customers, people throughout the value chain. Fantastic domain-specific advice from a super high-powered advisory board and a group of industry mentors, and potentially to offer seed funding at the end of that to help people take steps towards the next stage. So if that's you, or if you think that might be you, we'd love to stay in touch with you. We've got a whole series of events. There are 3 more of these webinars with 3 more exciting speakers. There are also a couple of design sprints where we'll specifically take you through exercises to help you kind of flesh out your idea and figure out what to do next. We'd love to see you at our launch day, which will actually be a live face-to-face event at Melbourne Connect in the Melbourne CBD, where we'll help you go a little further towards finding potential partners and fleshing out your idea. And then applications for this first round of the program close on the 20th of June. So if you go to the Rocket Seed AgTech Seeds webpage, you'll see links to click on to enroll for any of these future events. If you're ready to apply now for the program, the survey link or the application link is up there. And if you've got any more questions, our email address is up there too. So we'd love to hear from you. So thank you very, very much, everyone, for coming. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you at our next event, our next webinar event, which will be on the 1st of June. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.